Hello and welcome to the Cynic Weekly on Wednesday, the 22nd of October 2025. I'm your host, Barry Gallagher, and as always, I'm joined by Stuart Duggan. Stuart, how are you?
Hello, Barry. I am loaded with the common cold. So, to quote Brendan Rodgers, I'm not in a crisis, but I am in a difficult moment, which is perhaps appropriate for tonight's discussions.
Oh, very good. Also joined by Scott Fleming. Scott very kindly assisted with putting the rundown together today, so thank you for that, Scott, and how are you?
I'm not too bad. Kind of looking forward to the Champions League games tonight and just a night of European football. It doesn't involve Celtic, which is a pleasure at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. And just not to kind of jump ahead, but I think we all kind of watched Rodgers' press conference that came out earlier this afternoon. And just as you mentioned, Scott, the Champions League there, did you hear his comments about Eddie Howe? And he said, like,
Yeah,
Eddie Howe said, like, oh, this will be a tough place to come in the Champions League. I'm like, do you really want to be bringing that up, Brendan?
yeah, that was a classic Brendan name dropping anecdote, wasn't it? There's no real prompt to introduce it, but he done it anyway, and it just reinforces how long ago that seems now. I think that was quite an enthusiastic time when you're beating Newcastle 4-0 in a pre-season friendly, and Negron's playing well, and Johnny Kenny's scoring goals and all that, and it just seems a million years ago, doesn't it?
Yep. But also the game that they charged 25 quid for, so not a million years away from the current practice of the board, Stuart.
No, that was very much set the tone. Although, to be fair, you could argue it's about the only game that you got your money's worth from this whole season, so they were onto something with that.
Yeah, that's it. So we'll go straight into the opening question, and Stuart, I'll stay with you for the first part. Are we now at a stage where it's worth taking the risk and getting rid of Rodgers, even taking into account our lack of faith in the board to find a competent replacement? So a kind of shit position to be in. I think the only one who suffers, as always, is the fans.
Yes, I think that with Brendan Rodgers' role in general, the question, the way it's phrased there about whether it's a risk to try and replace him, I think that really depends on what your stance is to what degree Brendan Rodgers is contributing to the issues at the club. And I would argue that you can't stress it enough. It's not in isolation, and he's probably not the root of the biggest problems that we have. But I do think that he is now quite a big problem, and we're in this horrible situation. Like, if you weren't a fan, it would be fascinating. Like, one of my friends is a big Man United fan. He doesn't really follow Scottish football, and I think he was asking me about Danny Role, and I was like, it doesn't matter. Celtic are so fucked right now. And he's like, why are they fucked? And I think that people perhaps outside looking in don't realise just the mechanics of it, that Celtic are not just a team that are playing badly or in a poor run of form. They're a team that have stagnated since about February of this year. They have had an underfunded and poorly supported squad. There's clearly infighting between the board and the manager. The board probably currently benefit from the team not performing well because it takes the spotlight away from them and onto the manager. The manager is adamant that he's going to see out every day of his contract, despite the fact that you could pretty much tell he would like an out from somewhere. And you're in this horrible situation where you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. And I think that a lot of people from the outside looking in would just presume that Celtic will find some way to kickstart their season, rely on this course and distance, tried and tested, serial winners sort of shtick that we've had for such a long time. But I think to take that opinion is to really close your eyes to the football and what's been happening for not just a couple of games, but pretty much the entirety of the season. I know that there's been a lot of reflection on it domestically. That's as bad as it's been this season. But when you look at even the high spots, it's late winners against St Mirren, it's late winners against Motherwell, Kilmarnock, some justified, some not. The best the Celtic not scoring in 6 games and one of the best performances we've seen so far this season. We didn't score a goal in, and just things like that. And they all mount up. And I think what Brendan Rodgers' role in that, in terms of either how he's setting the team up tactically, personnel, these are all things that I'm quite sure that we're going to discuss over the next sort of half hour to an hour, because I think he's getting a lot of it wrong and it's very frustrating to watch. But in terms of what you can actually do to change things, I think that the injection of a new manager is probably one of the only things that would have a sort of quick fix or really give you that bolt of freshness at this stage in the season. And yet it's something that's so unlikely to happen because of the politics around the club that I think it only becomes a possibility in the very worst case scenario. And the worst thing is that I think we might actually be quite close to that worst case scenario. So it is something that I could now see playing out, which I wouldn't have thought 4 weeks ago, let's say.
Yeah, I think that's some really good points you raised there, and we've joked often enough on the weekly and other Cynic podcasts available on the cynic.co about the Mick McCarthy. It can't go on like this, can it? And it can. And Scott, it does feel like we're only kind of scratching the surface to how bad it could actually get. So how would you put this question together and to kind of put it towards you? Do you think, as Stuart says, that it might be a case that this is a way that we try and salvage the season, is by getting rid of the manager?
Yeah, you can tell I've got an axe to grind, can't you? That I'm the one. I've written the running order and just got that right in there at the top of it. I think with Rodgers, you always give him that bit of the whatever you think about his personality and some of the stuff he says in press conferences and so on. You always give him that little bit extra benefit of the doubt, I suppose, compared to some of the other managers we've had over the years. So I've mostly wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt all season. I know some Celtic fans lost patience with him a long time ago, maybe around about the time of the Kairat games or around about then. I think the main thing in my mind was I don't trust this board to get any kind of competent successor if we did push the button. But we're now just so bereft of any creativity or inspiration or even motivation based on the performance at Dens Park on Sunday that I'm probably at the stage, I'm not desperately agitating for us to get rid of him, but if it was to happen tomorrow or on Friday, for example, after a poor result against Sturm Graz, I really wouldn't be sad about it at all, because as I say, it would be a gamble, because I think there's always this feeling that in these situations that things can't get any worse. I'm not going to do it, but
again.
It can. Yeah, I think the one that springs to mind is obviously getting rid of Lennon in 2020 and John Kennedy coming in, and I don't think things necessarily got worse in that situation, but they certainly didn't get any better. And it really wouldn't be a surprise if it is that kind of candidate we're looking at in the event of getting rid of Brendan Rodgers mid-season. But it now just feels to me like at any other point since he came back to the club, getting rid of Brendan Rodgers would have felt like a big gamble to me. At this stage, it just feels like we're on the verge of, if we're not there, then we're on the verge of reaching the point where it's like a gamble worth taking. And I almost split it into two parts. I think there's a part of me whose priority is just winning the league, winning trophies this season. And that part of me probably thinks stick with Rodgers just a bit longer, because we probably look just as bad as we do now at stages 2 seasons ago and at stages of his third season, 2018-19. And out of nowhere, like, he somehow just got us moving again and we looked miles better. So there is always that vain hope in the back of your mind that he might sort of turn it on again. But the part of me which says, no, this is obviously just ran its course, let's jump now rather than wait until next summer, that part of me just wants to be entertained again. And I'm not even that bothered about trophies and stuff. I am just so very bored and depressed by watching Celtic at the moment. I was dreading that game last weekend. You should never be dreading a game away to a really limited Dundee game, but I was dreading it, and sitting through it was just such a thoroughly dispiriting experience, because we are just miserable to watch at the moment, and I'm almost finding that as hard a thing to deal with as the poor results.
Yeah, just on that, you kind of mentioned your points there about Scott, about there was a point 2 seasons ago, maybe around Christmas, where Rodgers was asked about how he was dealing with this sort of point of what's the word? Sort of loss of confidence or sort of controversy around the club, and he mentioned then about how motivated he was. We're going to listen to a clip now of what he said today, which was almost a carbon copy of those quotes on motivation. So we'll just play that now.
Michael, I think that I've never been so more motivated in my time at Celtic. I think that, you know, if I look at my own style as a coach, I would say I'm it's a transformational style. So I think I can come into a club and teach and inspire and motivate players. And at this point in time, I can't be any more motivated to turn it around, because it's okay when you're winning trophies and playing great football and everything else. The challenge is, and we all have seen the challenges from the summer through till now, and the continuation of that. So I'm so determined to try and turn the feeling around and the feeling on and off the pitch. Because for me, it's not what Celtic is about, or not what Celtic should be about. You know, this is an amazing club. And yeah, you will get frustrated at times. You know, we're only human, and you will get disappointed like you are at the weekend, because I could never, you know, with the greatest respect to Dundee, and I would never expect a Celtic team to go and lose.
Just a few points on that, Stuart. Firstly, it's like he does protest too much. Like, I am the most motivated man in the world, essentially. But just to pick up what he said straight away, and I think it's probably not the flex he thinks it is, because one criticism often labelled towards Rodgers is that he's very good at coming into a club and the players buy into his methods, but then they quickly run out. Like, when he starts to have his own recruitment, that's when things start to go south. I think the same happened at Leicester as well. And then he goes on to say about changing the feeling on and off the pitch. I don't know how he's going to do that off the pitch, unless it's to resign, maybe. Yeah, just a couple of those. Any you kind of take on those quotes?
I completely agree with you, and I felt I know we've been here before, where it's like, how much do you pay attention to what Brendan Rodgers actually says and how much don't you? But there was so much about that press conference today that actually really got my back up, and I'm probably someone that, much like yourself, Scott, has given him leeway and has accepted that he has been shafted by the board with the squad that he has, and that is never untrue. That never goes away from the equation. But you have to look at his role in it, and for him to say that he's a transformational manager, and the other quote that we have, maybe we'll play it, maybe we won't, that really bothered me, was that he's trying so hard to find a solution. You're not trying so hard if you play the exact same players in the exact same position and expect different results. And that is players that are underperforming, from your captain all the way down to traditional weak links from the squad. And you cannot possibly say that you're a transformational coach when you have literally abandoned a good 5 or 6 members of that team that have been brought in that you might not have fancied. It might not have been your optimum situation to have them in your squad. But Celtic are so backs to the wall at the moment that they need to find solutions, and to freeze out a promising, exciting young ball-playing centre-half when your most experienced centre-half is having a dreadful season, to not even consider playing a very, very pacey attacker when you keep complaining about having no pace and no drive in the team, and instead turning to players like Johnny Kenny, who you were happy to let go on loan. That does not strike me as a man that's tried everything and is still struggling to come up for answers. And it certainly doesn't sound like someone that's motivated to transform those individual players that have been brought to the club to try and maybe make them more than the sum of their parts. And I think that there's lots that he has at his disposal that he hasn't done and isn't doing. And I feel like the comment about, in his wild, because he said it twice, he says it in this clip and he said it another time, in his wildest dreams he couldn't have imagined Celtic going to Dens Park and losing. Well, I think if you're really prepared, you should have at least run through that scenario and decide what the game plan is. And he makes another quite laboured point about how he's having to coach in real time in games, trying out new things. Nobody's asking you to do that. You have ample opportunity to set up your team to play in different ways. I appreciate that as we get to like 2-3 games a week, you've got limited time to coach them, but maybe at the start of the season, don't go into it with the arrogance that you're just going to roll over teams, and at no point are you ever going to have to rely on a plan B. So he's all over the map, essentially, and that's what's frustrating.
The 3-5-2, both times we've done it at half time, it's really obvious it's not been rehearsed in training, isn't it? Like,
yeah. People didn't know where they were supposed to be, etc. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I know we're going to obviously talk about tomorrow, the two obvious things that he can do to try and change our fortunes are to change the personnel and change the way that we set up and how we play. And I feel like if we've played so poorly in consecutive games that he's had to make this Hail Mary pass at half time, surely you therefore have to start like that on Thursday and hope that you've done it. And you absolutely cannot just go to the well with the same midfield three and with Anthony Ralston and players that are letting you down week after week.
Scott, just before I bring you in, Stuart's kind of referenced it quite a bit there, but we've got a clip actually about how Rodgers hopes, prays, intends to find solutions. So we're just going to play that now.
When you say solutions, how do you go about trying to find them short term, given what you've just said and given, again, what you have at your disposal?
Well, it's something that we constantly look at and think about, and in terms of personnel and team shape, and like you've seen on Sunday, we're obviously down in the game, so we changed system. We 2 strikers, 2 wingers on the sides, 2 attacking 8s in midfield. So that's something that you're having to think about, obviously much more than if you've got your squad and settled and in place.
Are we likely to see you experiment more, Brendan, then going forward, perhaps tomorrow night, in terms of formation and personnel, trying to get the team that clicks on the pitch?
Yeah, I think that's what I have to do. But at the same time, you're having to find some level of stability as well. I think we've obviously had important players injured as well, which makes a difference to our level. But yeah, it's certainly something. Stability is important, and that hopefully allows you to find the tempo and the speed in the game that you actually want, and to deliver the best performance that you can. So, but yeah, I will never stop. I'm so motivated to try and find the solutions to it, and find a way and use my experience in order to help us get there.
Yeah, very referencing his former manager Rance Postecoglou there, Scott, but I kind of feel that was a kind of wishy-washy answer. Like, he kind of starts off the answer by saying, yeah, we'll try and find different ways to solve this problem, but then he talks about stability, and when he's talking about that, all I can think of is he's going to continue with Schmeichel, McGregor, probably Ralston, and then it's that sort of doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So it's another frustrating one from Rodgers there.
Yeah, I think like Stuart, it really got my back up just certain moments in that press conference. I thought it was quite a strange performance. Even just, I find it quite funny the way he always uses Michael's Christian name. Is it Michael Gannon? Is it the record guy?
That's it, yeah.
He seems to be quite pally with him. But yeah, I would agree with you. I took exactly that from it, the whole thing about stability. And that doesn't bode well to me at all. That suggests that when he is going to try new things, then it is going to be in these emergency scenarios with not a lot of preparation for it. And yeah, there was also that strange bit in the press conference where he's talking about how there might have been universities that have did studies on how sports teams have performed while fans are protesting. Like Stuart says, whether it's the first era or the second Rodgers era, maybe it's a fool's errand to be paying too much attention to what Rodgers says in these moments. But at the same time, there is that sense that he's not really doing himself any favours, and the more that he sort of tries to talk his way out of things, then the more it tends to just raise questions. Yeah,
it does. It doesn't kind of put anything to bed. It just kind of more issues arise from what he's saying. Unfortunately, this section of the pod is focusing on Sunday itself. I was lucky enough, is that the word? Unfortunate enough to be there on Sunday. And as we've covered already, I don't know how loudly Stuart came across on the TV, but as we were kind of coming out of the stadium at the end, there was sort of clear. The initial chant was Michael, get to fuck, and then it changed to Rodgers, get to fuck. And I think it was a very angry fan base. Myself, I can't remember the last time I was that angry at a game in terms of the performance. And I suppose it just adds to the sort of, it just fuels the fire of the bad feeling around the club.
Yeah, very much so. And it's so frustrating not to kind of slip straight back into his chat today, but he was referencing players like running and winning tackles and winning headers and like extremely basic fundamental stuff. And he's talking about these players as if the vast majority of the team are not the team that has won countless trophies over the last however many years. Carter Vickers, Scales, Hatate, McGregor, these are all players, James Forrest, these are players that are absolutely course and distance machines. Do you think that they've suddenly forgotten the standards at Celtic? And is he trying to focus all the blame on Sebastian Tynecastle and Kelechi Iheanacho and Kieran Tierney, because they're the only real new parts of the team, Benjamin Nygren? It's baffling, and I think that you have to expect that you're going to start catching flack, because you can talk about what happened in the summer and everyone knows it, that's an accepted part of it, but you have to be getting more out of the players, and you have to be... Celtic, they had so much possession, but I wouldn't say they were competitive. We never looked like scoring. We never looked like scoring the entire game. And some of the defending for both goals, essentially, is proper like slapstick Keystone Cops nonsense. And it doesn't feel like we're just a team that's a little bit devoid of ideas. It's just like the malaise is so deep and so rooted. And it feels like there's a lot of clamour for excuses and justification, all the conversation about the protest at the start, how much of an impact that had, etc. And I think that he has to expect the fans' ire, and I do think that in any other normal season, if he loses the 2 games this week, and if he fails to beat Rangers, I think that your position becomes untenable. And whether Celtic were delighted with the board or wanting massive change at the club, they have a duty of care to intervene and try and make some sort of meaningful change, because it was just turgid and it didn't look like changing at any point. And you now go into these games, not even like, I think I described it last week or the week before, as almost like morbid curiosity to see what you get. I have no faith in that Celtic team. If Celtic go and win a game 3-0, it would blow my mind right now, because I would not see it coming at all. And I know that you've talked about how it was in his first season, that malaise that pretty much ran up to Christmas, New Year, but the players that he had at his disposal then were just far superior as well. So I just don't see that sort of change happening without kind of intervention either in the playing staff or a management team.
Yeah, I think that's a good point you make, and you kind of said it as well, Scott, about you're almost dreading watching Celtic now. And as Stuart says, it's kind of like that meme, our expectations were low, but holy fuck. That's kind of what I took away from Sunday. And one thing that was kind of bummed up as a positive, maybe about a month ago, the other part of the season was we aren't scoring a lot, but we look pretty solid defensively. Well, that's all gone to shit as well now. So we can't score, and now we can't keep goals out. So it's a kind of recipe for disaster.
100%, yeah. Like, as I say, I was almost embarrassed to feel that way, but I was nervous about that game all through last week. And the main reason I was nervous was I was thinking, we are such an easy team to hold at arm's length at the moment. We are such an easy team to get clean sheets against. Carrot did it twice. A dreadful Rangers team did it. Hibs did it. Braga did it. I thought, okay, a team like Dundee, from what I've seen and read about them this season, they were just all over the place at the start, like losing League Cup games to lower league teams and stuff. And Presley's solution to that was basically just to cancel any attempt at attacking and just try and get clean sheets. And it worked to some small extent, because they started getting draws and they drew at Ibrox and so on. And I kind of thought they'd just do that on Sunday and play for a 0-0. And my fear was, worst case scenario, we're going to go there and draw 0-0. And what was really sort of a revelation about it and really quite scary is they actually had a go, and when they did have a go, they hurt us in lots of different ways, mainly set pieces and counter attacks. But they could have scored more. Like it could have went 3 or 4 towards the end. The guy Congreve had a field day, and yeah, as you say, any sense that was the one really functional department of the team is going out the window now. Carter Vickers just is all over the place at the moment, particularly in possession. It's not exactly news, but we know we can't really trust Anthony Ralston. There's no continuity in the left back position because we're chopping and changing between the two. And Scales, I think he's probably the last one that deserves criticism, strangely enough, because he has had a better season than we expected. But it does feel as if he's starting to struggle more and more at the moment as well. And yeah, it just, I think it's a really symptomatic of a struggling team when it feels like the new signings have now sort of been weighed down by this negative energy as well. Everyone's getting sucked into the same black hole, and we're really not seeing anything from Tynecastle at the moment. Nygren, I thought Iheanacho probably had his poorest game for us on Sunday. So that's worrying, just the sheer extent of it, and the mental side of it as well.
Yeah, I can agree more. And I think the right Scales has probably been the best out of the defence, but I thought he was god awful on Sunday. I thought he stunk the place out, just like the rest of them. Stu, obviously there's been a lot of sort of discourse around the manager's comments about Honda Civics and Ferraris. We've got another clip to play here where he's asked if he regrets that, and then we'll get your thoughts on it after.
Brendan, just to be sure, do you stand by the Honda Civic comment, no regrets over it?
Yeah, listen, it's something that I said at the time, and I said it because I felt it. So I've got no regret now. Yeah, and he kind of said right at the start of the press conference as well that he was referring to speed, and then he did that thing where he kind of laboured the point about, I'm pretty sure like a Honda Civic can't reach the speeds of a Ferrari, etc. And as Scott says, he talked about university studies and all that. I don't know if he's been looking up to try and find something like that, but
maybe he's back on that sailboater.
Well, yes,
some of her videos.
Yes, that's true. But yeah, I know that Scales was asked about the comments, and he said he didn't particularly know about them. He only kind of focuses on the team. He doesn't pay much attention to other things in the football. But I think if your manager was to say that about you in your line of work, you'd be like, fuck you.
Yeah, big time. I hate that as well. Rogers did it too. He's like, well, I don't know what comments you're referring to. So, I mean, like, I know there's a party line and all that, but you absolutely do. And I think, yeah, to clarify his position, he's obviously just still making the point that, the squad and his team are not in the position that he requires them to be in to play the football he wants to play. But what bothered me a lot about today is that he just kept back referencing the summer and how bad it was and how it is what it is, and then also saying that we can't use that as an excuse and we are where we are. And the constant flipping between the two doesn't help anyone. And when he's talking about speed in the team, there's two players specifically, I suppose, that refers to. That's Nicholas Kuhn and probably Kyogo, really, because Adam Ida was not blessed with pace. And he even sort of tries to include Daisen Maeda in that. It's like, well, Daisen Maeda is largely at your disposal. I know he was injured at the weekend, but you have had that, and it's not like we played really slowly and poorly at the weekend just there and no other time this season. He does have... This is what's annoying. I'm not suggesting that a player like Shin Yamada is a like-for-like quality with Kyogo or Kuhn, because he's obviously not. But he is very, very fast, and you absolutely can have that as even an agent of chaos to press and run around headless chicken style. You have that. Yang is also one of the worst footballers ever to wear the hoops, but very, very fast. So to try and sort of deflect and minimise his comments to say, it was actually just about speed, that's not true, just on a factual level. You have very fast players in there, but you have players that aren't playing very fast, and that's the difference. It's not just like a horsepower situation here. It's a comment about the state of the club, state of the window, and there's nothing that we can do about that. So you're in this... I think Gal and Will had a really good conversation about it the other day on one of the other pods. you're just in this like standoff. Who's going to blink first? Rodgers is obviously unhappy with the board are unhappy with Rodgers, the fan base are unhappy with both of them, the board are unhappy with the fan base. So it's a horrible situation. I think that for the Celtic board, I said earlier that they benefit from us being poor on the pitch, because it not only does it deflect from them, but it also maybe creates an opportunity for them to just eliminate one of these big problems that they have. And as a kind of broader point, what's the Celtic board's current end game to try and, if they're really absolutely adamant on holding their position and digging their heels in, how do they expect to do that? Because if they don't spend money and if they don't get the recruitment right in January, that's not going to appease people. If they back a manager that's clearly not getting a tune out of the team, that's also not going to appease them. They have the money. It's not like in COVID when you're like, the future of football is unclear, we can't be paying out, Neil Lennon, and, everything's so unclear. So they have a lot of money. They could pay off Brendan Rodgers and they could go and get someone in if they were a team of ambition. But it only really goes to highlight the problems that we have with these people that are running the club, that we don't trust any of them to do that, and that they won't have the foresight to necessarily do that. So it's just a total mess.
Yeah, to kind of build on what Stuart's saying there, Scott, it feels like we're kind of in limbo as a club. Obviously, the men at the top they've created the majority of this mess by their inactivity over a number of windows, which has left the squad in a really sorry state. That being said, as we've all kind of mentioned, we should have enough to get by Dundee, and it shouldn't be a complete shock when you aren't doing the basics, that you can get a bloodied nose. But as Stuart says, like, where do we kind of go from here? Like, everything seems so broken.
Yeah, and just to touch on the press conference one last time, Rodgers was given 2 or 3 really straightforward opportunities to just douse fire on that Honda Civic thing and just walk it back a bit. Like, no, it doesn't need to be a big extensive apology, but just like, okay, slightly poor choice of words or whatever. Just do something with all these other problems going on to make that go away, and he didn't do it. And that to me suggests that to me speaks to how he views the job at this moment. He knows he's not going to be here next summer. He knows it's very unlikely he's going to be sacked. And it's like, could take this tiny L and just show a little bit of humility. But it's like, I don't have to, so I'm not going to. But yeah, that there is definitely that sense.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but there was actually that point where he said, I can't please everyone, and I'm not going to try. He said something along those lines. He's like, you can't please everyone, so...
Yeah, it was almost like someone talking about it. When he said, like, I said it, I can't remember the exact phrase he used, but it was almost like someone apologised, someone talking about something they've done when they were drunk or something, just like in the moment or something. It's like, well, fine, we'll just say you chose your words poorly or whatever, but he didn't. And the limbo thing, yeah, I just... There's this sense that, like, I mean, we've spoken about it before on here, that, like, even the best case scenario this season of, like, if we do start playing better football and we do get to a point where we win a couple of trophies and that, still just so much questions and so much uncertainty at the end of the season. So it is a difficult mindset to get into as a fan, and you do just find yourself approaching games differently. I mean, we'll talk about it later, but this Sturm Graz game, I'm obviously not going to be there, but I think there's going to be such a strange atmosphere at that, and yeah, it even just influences your decision about like, you know, you're going to go to the pub to watch a game, or you're going to watch it at home or something. It's
hiding from behind the sofa.
yeah. It's just a sort of cloud hanging over everything at the moment.
Yeah, Stuart, in terms of you kind of went on from the Honda Civic comments to talk about what the players need to do, and we've got a wee clip here where he mentions about their talent.
All the things that aren't about talent is what we need to be better at, and then from that, then you should then show your talents, and that's what we reinforce.
Yeah, so the things that aren't talent, the things that don't make you a Ferrari, essentially. Weird kind of way he was talking there, but I always remember Alan of this parish saying that if one or two players are off form, that's on the players. But if the majority of them are off form, that's on the manager. And it comes back to that sort of tension. So obviously, as I said, there's tension between the board and the management, the board and the fans. Now there's tension between the manager and the fans. But Rodgers was often kind of, in typical Rodgers fashion, saying the first time around about this sort of holy trinity. First of all, don't be disrespectful. About the board, the manager, and the fans all pulling in one direction, and that seems a million miles away from where we are now. But is there any hope that the players could kind of sort of club together and pull us out of this in spite of the manager?
I think the short answer is no, maybe, possibly. Like, I just can't imagine. I suppose what we'd like to see, and how is it that you're going to, because Celtic have had poor performances even when they were playing some of their best football. How that take that first half against Hibs, Celtic were really good, and if they'd scored 2 or 3 of those chances, and suddenly you've got a really good solid win at home, and you've played really attractive football. I think that's the sort of thing that you can build from. But Celtic haven't had that all season, and there's just no indication that that's going to happen. I think it would take like a piece of individual brilliance or an amazing someone to just take it by the scruff of their neck and go and do something in the way that, we saw Nicholas Kuhn do for large chunks of last season. But who's that player going to be? Because now it feels like we've become so one-dimensional that Sebastian Tynecastle getting absolutely no joy because he's getting double and tripled up on. Your captain's having some of the worst form of his professional career. All the big players, Rio Hatate just looks like an absolute shell of his former self. I think that maybe the best chance that you have of seeing that is if the manager is willing to probably make some radical changes and stick by them, as in start Colby Donovan, and if he plays well, great. If he doesn't play well, start him again the next week. Don't just drop him straight out of the team. Drop Cameron Carter-Vickers, play Jemai Simpson-Pusey, play Austin Trusty, play players that play Bernardo, give him a chance, and give him a chance week on week, so that a player like Callum McGregor, Rio Hatate knows that they can't just turn in any old performance and then they'll be starting the next game because we don't have the options. Celtic do have the options. They're not the best options, but they're options, and the options that we currently have are failing us week in, week out, so they should be changed.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because so often, Scott, that it almost feels like Rodgers has no other choice but to change the lineup. He'll maybe bring in players for one game and then he'll just revert back to type. So that doesn't do anything for anyone, because it doesn't give the players out of form enough of a shock that they'll start up in their performances. But it also doesn't build confidence in the players who come in, knowing that it's just a sort of token gesture that they're in 1 week and then it'll go back to the man who's in possession of the jersey the majority of the time.
Yeah, and if you are someone like a CCV, and I would be interested to know, like, we know exactly what the situation is with Dyson, for example, and we know why his head's been turned and why he's not quite himself. I do wonder if when you look at CCV, whether something's going on there as well. We've just not heard about it because he looks so far off it at the moment. But I think part of it, to touch on what you've just said, is the idea that if you know there's no real jeopardy of you actually losing your place, and how hard are you going to be working on the training ground? How hard are you going to be working to eliminate the mistakes that you're making? It's just a thing that seems to have reoccurred throughout all of Brendan Rodgers' time at the club. This sense that he doesn't want. He not only wants to keep certain guys in the team when they're not performing, he gives you so little glimpses of the ones on the fringes that they sort of lose their own self-belief in the meantime. So on those rare occasions where they do get introduced, you can tell they're not quite themselves. So that was the thing about one of the many depressing things about Sunday. I think Gal touched on it the other day in the agenda, just like, of course I wanted Colby Donovan to start. I think we all did. But there's just this overwhelming sense of futility where you're just thinking, well, would it have made a difference? Probably not. It would be nice, also just because he's one of the few players you could rely on to have like a positive mindset at the moment and to really be trying to prove himself in every game. But you are just looking at it at the moment, and like Stuart, all those changes that Stuart's just listed off, I'd love to see them, but I also just feel like, for now at least, there's always that hope that something might change in the near future, spontaneously. But for now at least, it's just like, is any one individual or any two or three going to come in and really change that? And it's hard to believe it at the moment.
Yeah, Stuart.
This is probably going to be about as pessimistic as it gets, hopefully, for the night. Obviously, there's a lot of chat about Sunday as well, and going 8 points behind potentially if you drop points to Hearts. The 8 points behind at this stage of the season, whilst alarming, wouldn't actually be the thing that concerns me most about that. I think it would just be the fact that Celtic can't rouse themselves to win big games of any descript at this stage. And 8 points is a totally surmountable points tally, in my opinion. We've clawed back bigger points deficits with much less of the season to go, and I can say I'm certainly not one for wetting the bed and saying, oh, we're 5 points behind Hearts. Hearts are going to win the league. But I think where we all are, and if you include Rangers in that, Rangers have appointed a new manager. Obviously, they've had disaster after disaster. But I do think that there's probably some pretty good players in that squad that have been mismanaged. And if he gets a tune out of half of them, I could see that Rangers team being much, much better than they have been, certainly being competitive. And if they win on Saturday and we lose on Sunday, you're talking about a 5 point swing there. And it's just that the status quo has changed there. So they have this freshness and they have this, albeit slither of hope that it might get better now. Whereas if we continue as we are, if you've got a board that aren't going to act and remove the manager, if you've got a manager that's not going to act and change the way that we play, nothing's going to change and you're just going to sink. And it's exactly what we saw during the 10 season, albeit in slightly different circumstances. I think the biggest change that we have here is that there's lots that we can do about it, and it's just whether or not someone will step up and do something about it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And just kind of quickly, I'm kind of conscious of time. Greg Taylor was in the media today kind of talking about his Celtic exit and how he's kind of settling into life in Greece. Scott, there was David Strelick again. I know he kind of spoke after the window closed that Celtic were only really interested in January. But again, this kind of has come out from a few people that we were operating through a kind of third-party agent who wasn't his agent. And I'm sure, I can't remember which club it was that mentioned how Celtic do business, and they were surprised that a club was doing business that way. It just kind of adds to the sort of clusterfuck of what's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, Strelick's one, I do think it's interesting. He's gone there, and it seems to be quite a good Middlesbrough team, not far off the top of the Championship, but he's not started that well. I think he's got like 1 goal in 6 games or something like that. So it might be another one of those funny situations, a bit like when they beat us to the signing of Riley McGree, and they were really trying to get it up us at the time, and we went out and signed Matt O'Reilly. Does anyone know who Riley McGree is in the world at this point? I don't think so. Matt O'Reilly's sold him for 25 million and he's doing really well with Marseille. So I do think it'd be funny if a similar thing played out on a smaller scale, and Iheanacho, who was obviously just a total disaster at Borough, actually does all right for us, and Strelic doesn't do that well. But yeah, it's yet another incident where we seem to just be coming at it. It's such a strange way when we try and conduct our transfer business, even if it was last January rather than last summer, which is obviously where the focus has been when we're talking about other deals that didn't happen for strange reasons, like the Jakob Broom one and stuff like that. It's another one where we seem very far from world class in our operation, put it that way.
Yes, very much so. Stuart Scott mentioned earlier about the Sturm Graz game and the sort of expectation, not even in terms of performance or result, but just actually physically watching it. I won't be there as I've kind of said before, that I've not taken up my European tickets and come off the home cup ticket scheme, but it feels like a game that you could almost do without. Do you know what I mean? Like, Europe to me seems like a write-off, and I know that the point was made on the agenda that sometimes weirdly we pull a result out of nowhere in Europe when things are bad domestically, but I almost could care less about this game tomorrow. And I think that's purely because of everything that's going on. Initially, my kind of thoughts towards this was all the off-field stuff, and I've made it clear that I can't really separate the off-field with the on-field, but it just feels that Sunday's the most important game, and because we've started the campaign so poorly, that this game, for me, just kind of seems like a kind of stumbling block or an obstacle that I could well do without.
Yeah, I completely agree. All I would say is that it is almost just like another opportunity to see what way the wind's blowing and whether there is any green shoots and any chance of us igniting any sort of form or level of play that we're kind of accustomed to. I think when the draw was made, I would have had that as a nailed on 3 points, and I would have thought that we were going to probably coast through the qualification and be really talking about potentially top 8, if not safely into the playoff. And I think if they don't win tomorrow, I would genuinely think that we would struggle to make even that top 24, because if that's the level that we're at, and that's to take nothing away from Sturm Graz, I think, you know, they're champions, back-to-back champions of Austria. Yep. And we're just playing so poorly. But I also thought we would have played better against Braga, and we just looked miles and miles off it. And yes, I think that obviously having the focus on the domestic games would be better, but I also don't think that there's any guarantee that playing, that just having an additional day of training would necessarily give them more in the locker for that. And perhaps if you go and get a good result and a good performance, it might actually G everyone up a wee bit. And at best, if you're being optimistic, it's an opportunity to maybe just change the mood around the club slightly if you get that good performance from nowhere that we're not expecting.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Scott, that Stuart makes there, that while I've kind of outlined my feelings on it, but if we were to put in a performance and sort of our attacking players kind of came to life, for want of a better phrase, that it could really inspire us and get us up for the sort of huge top of the table clash on Sunday.
Yeah, one of my bosses is having a leaving do tomorrow, which starts at 4 o'clock in the pub directly across the road from work. So I'm going to be fleeing by the time the game kicks off. So I think that can only
you can't see it, so you don't have to physically see it.
Yeah, that can only be a good thing. Yeah, I mean, we all looked at the Dundee game as a potential springboard, and obviously we know how that turned out. But this really, if you can somehow take all the context out of it, it is a game which, in any normal circumstances, you would be looking at as strong favourites for. Like, they are another one of these European clubs who seem to have a good player trading model and some good young players coming through, and they've obviously sort of ended Salzburg's domination of European football, which is no mean feat, even if a lot of Salzburg's struggles seem to be self-inflicted. So they deserve credit for that. But at the same time, when you look at their results in Europe over the years, like, they took a lot of hidings in the Champions League last year. They took another one against Bodo Glimt to the Champions League qualifiers this year. Midtjylland beat them pretty comfortably on match day 1, and then they beat some team called Rangers on match day 2, which I don't think we should be putting too much credence towards. So it's absolutely a team that we are capable of beating, and hopefully Celtic Park, it's an 8 o'clock kickoff, not a 6 o'clock one, like the Braga one. You'd like to think that the players will come into it a little bit refreshed with a different mindset, and that, I mean, I'm loath to even use the phrase springboard, but hopefully, of all the games coming up, this is definitely one of the more winnable ones. It's certainly, I would say, more winnable than Tynecastle, probably more winnable than the Midtjylland one. So yeah, hopefully we can find something. But if we line up in roughly the same formation that we started with at Dens Park, with more or less the same starting lineup, then I think everyone is just going to sigh internally a little bit. And I don't know what the official attendance was for Braga. Was it about 40,000?
Something like that, yeah.
I think this is going to be really unprecedented, how low the attendance is tomorrow for a European game at Celtic Park. And I certainly don't want to enter into any of that chat about how that's going to lead to a negative result and then that'll be the fans' fault or whatever. But I think it's not going to help, certainly, to state the obvious.
Stu, I knew you wanted to come in, but just before you do, I genuinely think that what the lineup comes out, an hour and 15 before kickoff, and I think it's sort of on a shaky peg what the attendance is going to be, but as Scott says, if it's anywhere near the lineup for Sunday, I think there will be people doing that sort of Grandpa Simpson meme that they'll just turn back and go back to the pub.
Yeah, if you see Johnny Kenny lining up, then it's probably not the night out for you. I know we're talking about maybe just pulling a performance out of thin air, and that is literally what we're talking about, because I think maybe around the Hibs game we're saying, you're letting the new players bed in and maybe they're getting better, and we've just seen too many examples now that that's not really the case. It's a poor side that are playing poorly. I have a feeling though that the most likely we are to see a big performance will probably be when their backs are most against the wall, which I would probably be inclined to think would be Sunday. And I kind of think as well that if you look at, I know there are caveats, it was penalty, a goal that was gifted to you, and then you scored one good goal from open play against Motherwell. I do feel like the sort of style of play and a team coming out and having a go at you in whatever capacity that is might just create the element of chaos that's required for someone to produce a bit of quality, and we're not just stifled and running through the muscle memory of not being able to break down teams. So I'm not sure if you're going to quite get that level of adversity tomorrow, and I don't think that a disappointing Europa League campaign probably has the same emotional sting for the players as getting horsed in the Champions League would. So perhaps it's more Sunday than Thursday, but who knows? We're operating in sort of blind faith territories now, because there's no indication that that's coming.
Yeah, and just before we kind of turn our attention lastly, Scott, towards Tynecastle on Sunday, if we were to, I suppose even if we were to draw, never mind lose, would that be all but done for you in terms of getting out of the group stage?
I think it probably would be, looking at the fixtures. I mean, I don't think Midtjylland away next is ideal, and then I think we've got Feyenoord away and then Roma at home, and the last two are a bit more winnable, at home to Utrecht and away to Bologna. But I think if that run of games goes as you would probably expect it to, then you'd be pretty much cooked at that point. And I know what you're saying about it's kind of hard to care about the Europa League this season, given everything else that's going on, and just how humiliating it was to get knocked out of the Champions League by a team like Kairat. How much money is there really to make out of Europa League, even if you do well? Not a lot. How much prestige is there in it? Not a lot, until you get to at least quarter-final, semi-final sort of territory. But at the same time, I think it would be absolutely humiliating for us not to finish in the top 24 of the Europa League. So I really hope we can avoid that fate. But if we don't win tomorrow, then I think it is pretty much curtains.
Yeah. And then, as I said, the big one on Sunday. It's frustrating, Stuart, that if we were a fully functioning football club, that this week would be one of the most exciting, because you have a game in Europe at home, you're going for a top of the table clash at Tynecastle, traditionally over the years a place that we've done well, but it almost feels to me like, as you said, you can't really trust this Celtic team in any fixture, let alone let alone against Hearts, who are flying at the top of the league with that sort of crowd right on top of you, who will obviously be buoyant because of their league form and obviously their hatred for Celtic. It almost feels like if we were to win, it would be such a shock. Obviously, a very welcome one, but it kind of feels like the worst fixture you could be playing right now for a Celtic team.
Yeah, true. And I think for fans, I think the fact that it almost looks so far gone just now is probably the best way to approach it. I think if you went in expecting that that's the time that we're going to pull out the big result and really bank on that, then you might just come away disappointed, like you would have done on Sunday there with the Dundee game. I think it will be pretty box office one way or the other, because Hearts have been playing well. It would be quite nice to just derail the momentum ever so slightly, because I don't expect, generally speaking, for Hearts to be able to play the way they have done, have that form that they have done for an entire season. I just don't think it's sustainable. You've yet to kind of experience any injuries or any real adversity. And obviously, with Celtic and Rangers being so poor this season, you can understand why there's so much hype and buzz about it. So it'd be nice to just sort of quell that a little. But you go into it with just no faith that someone's going to step up and do that. But it would be nice.
Yeah, and Scott, you kind of touched on it in the rundown, but Hearts' kind of style of play, and a lot of their goals, as you mentioned, coming from set pieces and the pressing and possession high up the pitch. Given what I said about the atmosphere and Celtic being low in confidence, it just kind of adds to that feeling that Hearts will probably be licking their lips about the prospect of playing this Celtic team. And I know that Callum McGregor has said in the press this week that we make it easy for teams to play against us.
Yeah, I am a bit of a sort of Hearts truther. I've been quite dismissive about them all season. Which is probably just ensuring that if they do win the league next May, then I'll be the one who, like, they're all quote tweeting me and calling me a Raj or whatever and clipping bits of me on this podcast. Because I just look at them and I think, okay, they've done some really good business in the summer, Braga, Kizarides in particular, but I played 4-4-2 with Cammy Devlin and Benny Maringame in the middle of the park, and Harry Milne, who was Partick Thistle's left back not long ago, as a right midfielder. I just wonder, as Stuart does, how sustainable that is over the season to constantly keep getting results week in, week out. So I really have my doubts about it. Even going back and watching the highlights of the Edinburgh Derby a couple of weeks ago, I think they were quite lucky to win that game. Hibs had a couple of chances in the counter attack and a few narrow offsides of Martin Boyle. So I don't fully believe the hype, but at the same time, I think they're on the crest of a wave, and we are whatever the inverse of that is. So I would be shocked. yeah, we're at the bottom of the Mariana Trench.
Bottom of the ocean. Yeah, that's it.
So I would be pleasantly surprised if we got a point on Sunday. I'd be shocked if we won, and I think I mentioned it earlier. It's kind of embarrassing even to say it out loud because as a ground we've won so many times over the years, but I would absolutely take a point if you offered me one now, because it does just feel as if it's about sort of staunching that bleeding just now and keeping the gap at 6 rather than 8. Because as much as I can sit here and say whatever I want about the squad and so on, there is a lot of momentum and positivity surrounding that football club at the moment. And if they get to double digits, which isn't far fetched, then you're giving yourself a lot of hard work to do and not a lot of margin for error. And we know this Celtic team, even if they start to improve, they're not the kind of team that's going to be reeling off 7, 8, 9 wins in a row between now and the end of the season. That we are going to have fairly regular blips. I think that's just unavoidable. So yeah, we really need to stop it sort of speeding downhill any further than it is already. But yeah, it's not a game I'm looking forward to, put it that way.
Yeah, definitely not. And Stu, you mentioned earlier that you think 8 points would be surmountable. Not to be even more pessimistic than you were earlier, but what would be the points total that would really alarm you that something had to be changed instantly?
As I say, I think when we look at the next 2 weeks, they're obviously very, very big weeks in terms of the fixtures, but I think it's because you are talking about potentially being 8 points behind in the league, potentially pretty much in a rudderless European campaign, and potentially coughing up a trophy to one of the worst Rangers teams in history. And the totality of that, I think, is what would really ring the alarm bells. I think that, yeah, you probably don't want to be getting into double digits. I think that if Celtic go to January and they're still behind or in touching distance of like 5 to 8 points, I think I would still be okay with that, given that you have the leeway, you have the financial leeway to go and make a difference in the window and to actually strengthen the squad. And traditionally speaking, we are better sort of January to May than most other teams, and certainly better than a team that's never done it before and a manager who's come up short more times than
course and distance, remember. Of course.
Course and distance, yes. The saying, the phrase of the day. Then you've got the notion that, but you know, saying that, not to come back to Mick McCarthy, but in January you're expecting Dyson Maeda to leave.
Give him the job at this stage.
There's no guarantee. Well, he probably will be next up, and there's just no guarantees that they'll go and
There's the
do the business. And the complication
the AFCON chat as well, isn't there?
Oh, of course, yeah.
The AFCON chat, I mean, there's quite a lot of people that seem to be lumping players that aren't even African into that chat, which is wild. And then certainly ones that don't play for the national team. So you're really sort of looking at Sebastian Tynecastle, which is December, isn't it? It falls at a funny time of the year.
Yeah.
You mean we can't send Ralston and Scales to
It's highly unlikely. It's highly unlikely. Yeah, that's just another thing to have to put up with, where you probably have to consider, I was going to say to be fair to Rodgers, but I don't really feel like being fair to Rodgers. I think they are trying to manage Balikwisha a bit better than some of the other players that they are just literally going to the well with over and over again. With the notion that, he doesn't speak any English, he's maybe struggling to adapt a little bit culturally and from a football perspective. But you do have to get him up to a stage, because he's going to have to be your starting winger when Tynecastle goes. And obviously, if literally anyone gets injured, you see how quickly the drop-off is. So, that'll be another interesting challenge in a series of challenges.
Yes, that's it. To kind of finish off then, I think we'll kind of try and muddle together a lineup. Obviously, we know, Scott, that Dyson is out tomorrow. AJ should be okay for tomorrow, Roger says. But if it was to stay the same, that Dyson maybe doesn't make Sunday as well, we'll let you do the keeper and back four, and then I'll let Stu do the midfield and forwards.
I'd probably have Tynecastle in there, but that's clearly not going to happen.
Schmeichel was doing my head in with these kind of pleading hands to the fans at the protesting.
He was
I wasn't mad about that either. So I'd have Donovan, I'd have CCV, it's always difficult with these ones when you've got your long-standing grudges, but there's also the day-to-day reality of what Brendan Rodgers has going on in his head.
Stability, of course, in the
I'm just going to accept the big kind of hovering cloud of futility and just say fuck it, Scales. And I'd probably say Sirachi.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's kind of gives you more energy, and
I think right wing's the big one. I think what you're saying about looking at the team sheet and like deciding to just stay in the pub. I think if we see Yang or Forrest on that team sheet tomorrow, I think people are going to die a little bit inside. But then again, how do you solve that problem? I'll leave that up to you too.
Yeah, it's true. Stu, I think probably the hardest part, or the most frustrating part of the team is, I think you made the point last week, that with the clusterfuck of a window, probably central midfield is the one we thought, right, we're okay there. We've got 6 players that could probably play. But that was on the proviso that they actually turned up and could find a man with a pass, could make tackles, etc. And I would argue that's probably been out with the right wing position, where we literally have just kind of flinging enough shite at the wall and hope that something sticks. I think the midfield has been the biggest disappointment so far this season.
It is, and you could argue that it's probably the quickest way to fix the team, is if you can get that right, and if you can get that ticking, you would presume that there would be a real knock-on effect, and that both of you become a bit more difficult to break down and play through, and a bit more creative going forwards. I think the most maddening thing about Rodgers, and all his talk about, I'm trying everything, we're all trying to figure out who did this, that sort of approach, and continually playing McGregor, Hatate and Nygren, 3 players that just don't play very well together. And I understand that he feels like he needs to have a creative player in there, and that would be Nygren and or Hatate. But I just think that neither of them are particularly functional right now, and I know that Nygren's maybe been a bit more clinical and brought a little bit more quality than most players on the side. But I think his presence there really upsets the dynamic. So I would say I think he has to make tangible changes to the team, and I think that that's a really easy win for him. So I think it will be McGregor. Don't think it should be, but I think it will be. I think he has to play Arne Engels at some point. Like, it's wild. He didn't come on at all, did he, on Sunday? Like, just still sat on the bench.
I think he did. I think I might be wrong.
Yeah,
I feel like he did the last 10-15 minutes.
Fair enough. Engels and I guess maybe McCowan, because he's a slightly more creative outlet, and it's not like you're asking him to go and play against a Barcelona or a Manchester City and it's like a sky-high level he's never played at. It would probably do him the world of good to sort of go up the rungs a little bit and play at a higher level. So I'll say those three just because Satati's been dreadful, and I've got a sort of off-on relationship with Negrin.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose, having said what I just said about how difficult it would be to, or not difficult, but the disappointing area of the midfield, being the midfield. But Scott, you mentioned the wide right. Am I right in saying that Tynecastle played wide right recently for Tunisia?
I think he did, yeah.
Yeah, so would it be the case that you maybe bring him over to the right-hand side, play Balak Wishat on the left, and then Ian Axel through the middle?
Yeah. Just to sort of go back to what I said about back foot, I think I said Donovan for right back. That's me just assuming that AJ isn't actually ready to start, but maybe he is.
I feel like the implication he gave today was almost that he would start. I feel like that was the gimme that he was offering. Like, Dyson's not going to play, but AJ's back, so that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, you won't get 90 out of him, you would presume, or he shouldn't be if the guy's done his hamstring. That's not a very smart
He's
way
one
to...
you would definitely want to be starting on Sunday, though, isn't he? So even if they can get half an hour out of him.
True. I think that he might... I know everyone's saying that he's just going to go and do the same thing over and over again. I think he might start in a 3-5-2. And I think that Sirachi and Johnston probably give you as good a chance as you've got of fulfilling some sort of wing-back roles. So I'm not really sure what that means for the dynamic.
I think the scary part is who partners Ian Axel in the 3-5-2.
I wonder if you try and utilise a Tynecastle or a Negrin's creativity around there and sort of almost like a false nine sort of
role. Like a 3-4-2-1 more like.
Sort of, yeah. But then we are getting pretty perilously close to Ruben Amorim sort of levels of...
That worked pretty well on Sunday.
Some Roman tens, so maybe that's the answer. Negrin and Tynecastle is tens. It's desperate, innit? It's desperate times.
Yeah, if we stick with 4-3-3, there's no obvious answers. Like you could try Tynecastle in the right wing, which hasn't seemed to want to do so far, but then who do you play on the left? It's like a kind of whack-a-mole thing, isn't it? Where new problems spring up. I would almost be tempted to just to get him out of midfield where he's obviously not performing. I'd be tempted to go Negrin right wing and leave Tynecastle in the left.
Oh, he's so bad at right wing.
He's slow, isn't he? But I mean, at least he knows the position and he will get into some positions to shoot, which is one of the few things he seems to be able to do competently.
What's a slower car than a Honda Civic?
Yeah.
A Ford Negrin.
What's a Swedish? Yeah, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of shit,
quick prediction from you, Scott?
For Sunday?
Yeah.
1-1.
1-0. Okay. Stu?
Yeah, score draw. We'll concede 2 goals from corners.
That's impressive that you think we're going to score 2. I don't think we're ever to score ever again.
That's a very good point you've made. Oh well. Yeah, fair. I said what I said.
Yeah, you can't please everyone, so you won't.
Do you know what I'd like? Yeah, I can't please everyone, so I want 3-2 with a last minute winner. That'd be good.
Stephen McManus style.
Yeah.
Well, I think we'll leave it there. Stuart, thanks very much.
Thanks very much. Sorry, it's a never-ending torrent of misery.
Lovely.
I suppose to try and end on a semi-positive note, like probably one of the lowest ebbs in recent history was immediately after Rodgers left and Lennon came in, and we went to Tynecastle and won with a Edward goal, didn't we, in the stoppage time? So
Barry Gallagher famously not knowing what to do with himself. Video
on
clip.
TV, that's
one
right.
Of my favourites. Are you
on the
Send it in the chat,
Scott.
I'll send it in the chat to show you. I was astounded, dumbfounded. I don't know. I was just shocked.
I mean, I can't remember whether Hearts had a good team at that point. It might have been a fucking Ian Caffro team or something, but it's certainly not as good as the team they've got now. But maybe that's something to cling to.
Yeah, and that's a good point to you on. So this has been the Cynic Weekly. I've been your host, Barry Gallagher, Stuart Dugan and Scott Fleming, and we'll speak to you down the road.